Today we're going to look at a really tough chapter in Revelation 17. It's tough in two different ways, and one way is that it's hard to understand about the heads of the beast, and the other way is to identify the prostitute. The mother of all prostitutes is not a fun thing to do. It's not something that anybody should relish, but I do think it's very clear. But we'll see that near the end. That's going to be an important part of what we learn in Revelation 17. So Revelation 17:1, this is how it starts. One of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters." So here we're going back. The great tribulation was announced, and the bowls were poured out, and we're not quite done with the very end of the bowls there, because the last bowls were about the battle of Armageddon, which we will see the ending of that in chapter 19. But we have another break here, 17 and 18, and the first part of this break tells us about the great prostitute, and it teaches us about the punishment of this great prostitute. In the introduction of this great prostitute, she is not yet sitting on the beast, and she is sitting on many waters. The waters are described to us, and they're identified to us in Revelation 17:15. And he said to me, the water which you saw, where the prostitute sits, are people, multitudes, and nations, and tongues. When the prostitute is first described to us in this chapter, she is sitting above many people, many multitudes, many nations, and many tongues. This prostitute, whoever she is a very international organization or international government or international religion. She's got a far reach in many nations. That this prostitute is extremely connected politically is proven to us again in Revelation 17:2. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. Before she even associates with the beast, this prostitute is not only accepted by many nations and many people, but the kings of the earth have also been drinking of the wine of her adulteries. So they've been drinking the wine of her adulteries, which is described to us in Revelation 17:6. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. So the nations and the inhabitants of the earth, before the beast even comes, and before she's pictured as riding the beast, she's already influencing a lot of this world. And one of the things that she does is that she persecutes God's people, her holy people, and she drinks their blood. So she really is after God's people. When John sees her, he's greatly astonished. We must think about that, because John would not be astonished at the persecution of the saints. He was there when Jesus was crucified. He had seen horrific persecution at the hands of the Roman Empire. He most definitely saw the persecution of many other saints throughout his lifetime. He himself was imprisoned, and many had died by the time he was in prison. Stephen was stoned, and all kinds of things had happened. Paul was going around arresting people at one point, and they were killing the saints. That she would be drunk at the blood of the saints would not have surprised him, unless there was something extremely shocking that he saw. Later on, when we see who this prostitute is, we'll understand why John was so astonished at it. In Revelation 17:3, now we find this prostitute now riding on top of a beast. And so here we have the prostitute who will be riding on top of the last government that Satan will set up on earth to control the world during the tribulation. And she's riding on him. 17:3, it says, "Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. There I saw a woman sitting on the scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns." This beast we saw in Revelation 13, and we've seen this beast in Daniel and several places throughout the Bible. This is the final stage, the final government of the Antichrist, and she is riding the beast. So she has a very important part to play at the beginning of the government of the Antichrist. And this is why it is very important for us to understand who she is, so that because she will be pointing us to the government. As we watch her, we will be able to understand the times we're living in and understand when this government comes. One thing we understand reading Revelation 17:3 is that the beast and the prostitute are separate organizations, let's say. They are not the same. So we cannot call the prostitute the beast. The prostitute is not the Antichrist, although the Antichrist spirit has been working through her, obviously, throughout the ages, because she has such a reputation among the kings and the people of the world. So the Antichrist spirit is very much alive in the prostitute, but the prostitute is not the beast and cannot be the beast, but she has a close relationship with the beast at first. Later on, she is thrown away by the government there, by the 10 horns and the 7 heads. They cast her away. In order to understand a little more about who the beast is, and in order to understand a little bit of what is written later on in verse 8 and 9, and it's extremely confusing, we should take a quick look at what's written in Daniel. In the beast that Daniel saw, and the statue that Daniel saw, and Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and the interpretation of that, because it's going to help us as much as it can to understand what's going to be written here in Revelation 17. So let's look back quickly in Daniel 2:31 to 35, and let's look at this dream that Nebuchadnezzar had of a statue that represented 4 kingdoms. Daniel 2:31 to 35. Your Majesty looked, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all broken to pieces and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace, but the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. So Nebuchadnezzar saw a big statue that represented kingdoms, and these are the kingdoms to come. These 4 kingdoms are described to us, and they will end with the coming of Jesus, who will come back and break them. This mountain will come and strike the feet of the statue, break it all to pieces, and then set up his kingdom on earth. And so this is a reference to the second coming of Jesus, before he starts his kingdom on earth during the millennium. So we got the head of pure gold, the chest and the arms of silver, the belly and the thighs are bronze, and then there's the legs of iron, and the legs of iron and the feet of iron are somewhat related. Since they both have iron, they're the same kingdom, and yet they're separate. It's got 2 parts to it. It never really ends, and it never really begins. You see, it just kind of phases out and phases back into a different type of kingdom. So the legs are iron, the feet are iron and baked clay. And then there's a rock cut out, but not by human hands. It strikes the feet and smashes it, and the rock becomes a mountain that fills the whole earth. And the reason we're coming back here to Daniel is because all these kingdoms are very clear here. There's no doubt, and you cannot miss who these kingdoms are. First of all, Babylon is described as the head of gold. Daniel 2:36 to 38. This was a dream, and now we will interpret it to the king. Your Majesty, you are the King of Kings. You are that head of gold. So Babylon is the king. Babylon is the first kingdom that's represented, and that means that the second would be Persia, would be the chest and the arms of silver. Then would come the kingdom of Greece, which would be the belly and the thighs of bronze. And this we can also read in Daniel 2:39. After you, another king will arise, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. So the next 2 kingdoms that come after Babylon are Persia and Greece, and they're clear. And the one after that is clear as well, because we know that Rome came after this. So the Rome is the legs of iron. It never really ends. It gets separated into two kingdoms, and then all of a sudden it starts to mix back into clay. So Rome is not completely disappeared, but it becomes another phase. There's another phase of Rome that arrives, and it is Rome that gets destroyed by the coming of Jesus, the second coming of Jesus. So therefore, we got to understand that the Roman Empire hasn't completely disappeared. It somehow it disappears, somehow it comes back again, and this is the mysterious part that causes confusion for us when we read Revelation 17. Daniel 2:40-44. This describes a little more of this last kingdom. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, for iron breaks and smashes everything. And as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. So Rome comes at first. As iron, it crushes everything. At first, it's extremely strong. Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom, yet it will have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay. The Roman Empire is going to be divided into two legs, basically, and it's a perfect image of what happened. The Roman Empire divided between east and west. There's going to be a re-emerging of this Roman Empire, but it's going to have some of the strength it had, and yet it's going to be mixed with clay. 42. As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron mixed with the baked clay, so the people will be mixtures and will not remain united, any more than iron mixes with clay. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. So this final kingdom of Rome, they're going to try to unite everyone, and to a certain extent, they're going to be able to do this, as we read in Revelation 13. But it's not going to be a strong unity. It never will be quite accepted completely, although it will be forced on everyone. So there's going to be disunity at the same time as unity. But here is the part we know, that the God of heaven will come up, and he will set his kingdom up. And all these kingdoms will be destroyed, so they will no longer exist. This is talking about the final battle of Armageddon, where all these kingdoms, the final kingdom of the Antichrist is crushed, and the 1,000 years of God's reign and his eternal reign in the new heaven and new earth starts. It's important for us to understand this particular part of Daniel, because it helps us to understand one of the mysteries in Revelation 17, that the Roman Empire is going to somehow appear again, and it's going to appear in a very clear form that's going to surprise the world, because the world would never believe that the Roman Empire could come back again. Let's quickly look at the four beasts that Daniel saw. This also shows us that the fourth beast, the fourth kingdom, which is Rome again, is the beast kingdom, is the actual Antichrist kingdom, the final one. You can find this in Daniel 7:2-8, where he sees a vision of four great beasts. The first beast was a lion, the second was like a bear, the third was like a leopard, the fourth was terrifying and frightening and very powerful. That's the Roman Empire there. It had large iron teeth. It crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns. While I was thinking about the horns, here before me was another horn, a little one, which came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it. This horn had eyes like the eyes of human beings and mouth that spoke boastfully. So here it is, out of the fourth beast, eventually there's going to be 10 kings, and out of the 10 kings, 3 are going to be taken away, and 1 is going to rise up, and that is the beast, the Antichrist that comes in chapter 13, and that is talked about in chapter 17. Somehow, when the Roman Empire comes back again, when this final kingdom is set up in Revelation 13, there's going to be parts of it. There's going to be parts of it that are going to be Babylon, Persia, and Greece. And it's funny how Revelation 13 mixes those 3 kingdoms into it. Revelation 13, 1-2, The dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on its horns. On each head a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear, and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power. And then Daniel goes on and describes a little more about this little horn here, which is important. It kind of helps us with the confusion again in Revelation 17. Daniel 7:11-14. Then I continued to watch because of the boastful words the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain and its body destroyed and thrown into the blazing fire. The other beasts had been stripped of their authority, but were allowed to live for a period of time. In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and people of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. Jesus' kingdom is set up here. So we have the Antichrist coming, speaking boastfully. At the beginning of the 1,000 years, he's locked up, and eventually at the end of the 1,000 years, he's destroyed. Daniel 7:23-27. He gave me this explanation. The fourth beast is the fourth kingdom that will appear on earth. It will be different from all the other kingdoms, and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. Then the 10 horns and the 10 kings who will come from this kingdom. After them another king will arise, different from the earlier ones. He will subdue 3 kings. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people, and try to change the set times and the laws. The holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time and a half a time. But the court will sit, and his power will be taken away and completely destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, power, and greatness of all the kingdoms under heaven will be handed over to the holy people of the Most High. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all the rulers will worship and obey him. So this beast will come into power for a time and a half a time, for 3.5 years. That's the 3.5 years of the beginning of the tribulation. And he will try to change rules and laws. He will try to set himself up as the Messiah. And he will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people for that period of time. So at first they accept him, and that's what we saw before, but then the Jews understand that he is not the real Messiah. They turn and they're oppressed by him. And he sets himself up to be the Most High in their temple halfway through this time. Then it says in verse 27 that God's kingdom will be set up, and it will be given to the holy people. And that is not the church. The church is not to reign for 1,000 years. That is a promise for the Jewish people and the people of God, Israel. Okay, let's go back to Revelation now. And try to make some sense of who the beast is and what is happening here. We're going to read Revelation 17:7-8, and then we'll read verse 11. We're going to try to figure out who the beast is that is said to that he once was, now is not, and yet is to come. Who is this? Revelation 17:7-8. Then the angel said to me, "Why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and yet will come up out of the abyss and go to its destruction. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because it once was, now is not, and yet will come." And then verse 11, "The beast who once was, and now is not, is an 8th king. He belongs to the 7, and is going to his destruction." We must understand that there's something confusing happening here with the Roman Empire. Remember once more that the Roman Empire once was, it never really stops, so it always has been, but it once was, it seems to disappear, and it comes back again. And this is the kingdom of the beast as far as a government standpoint. It never really ends, because it's the 4th kingdom that never ends until the second coming. But yet, it does seem to end, as we have experienced in history, but it's still there. And the beast that is talked about here, he's both a government and he's a person. So the beast as a government is the new Rome coming up again, who the prostitute is sitting upon. But the beast as a person, though, will take full control of this seventh kingdom, the new Rome, and he will become the eighth. Although there is no 8 heads, he becomes the complete controller of that seventh kingdom. So he's kind of an eighth kingdom in of himself. As a government, he once was, which means in the past he was the Roman Empire, the first part of it, who crushed everybody, who was extremely hard. And then for a while he disappears, and yet he reappears again at the end of the time and reestablishes this Roman Empire, and that is what astonishes everybody. So that is how he once was, now is not, and then reappears again. As a person, though, he will be taken away, and then he will return out of the abyss to his destruction. Both verse 8 and verse 11 describe him as one who once was, now is not, and yet will come out of the abyss and go to his destruction. And I think there's a mixture of speaking of a government system and speaking of the beast himself. The fact that he once was, now is not, and will come again is the governmental side of it. Rome once was, and then came back again, and that was astonishing to all. The beast as a person, the Antichrist himself, he will come out of the abyss and go to his destruction. So during the 1,000-year reign, he will be thrown into the abyss, and he will come back out again to deceive the nations and then go to his destruction. So this is a future statement about him, about the person. This is not the whole kingdom thrown into the abyss and the whole kingdom coming back out again. So I think this is the most confusing part to me of this chapter. But this is how I would understand it.